Hi, my name is Veronica, and today I'm going to be talking about the 10 books that I read in March. This was such a good reading month for me. I got to a lot of books that have been on my TBR for a really long time, and I'm so excited that I was able to knock those out. So let's get started. First, I read Rain of Shadows and Endings by Melissa K. Rourke. This is the first book in the Legacy series. This is about Tessa and Theon. Theon is a legacy, and basically a legacy is somebody that can pull powers from Fae, which Tessa is, and they use that to basically like enhance the power they already have. And these Fae are like their source where they're drawing this power. I really love this book. I had been seeing so many good things about this on Book Talk, and I had already read the first couple books in the Lady of Darkness series, and just hearing like all the good things surrounding this book, I had to finally pick it up, and I'm glad I did. I really loved Tessa as a character. I thought she was so strong, and there was a lot of trauma that was going on with her, and you could tell that she really used that as an outlet whenever she was speaking with Theon or any of the other characters in this book. It was definitely a lot of the driving force behind the actions that she made. Theon was such an interesting and complex character because on the one hand you could tell that he was really trying to do the right thing, and the right thing for him was going based on the things that he grew up with, and the way that he grew up, those things were not really conducive to how he should really be interacting with like a Faye or with Tessa. And throughout the story, you really see him struggling with what is the right way to handle this relationship that they've been thrown into. And again, like I said, I just really love this. I thought she did such a good job with the magic system and setting this whole world up, and really just bringing in like these gods and the Fae and the legacies, and just explaining the reasoning behind why this is the way that this world works. The ending of this book was so crazy, and honestly I expected nothing less because again, I've read Lady of Darkness, and I know that she is known for like having crazy endings and doing these things where it just makes you want to read the next book. And I will be reading the next book actually in April, and I'll be listening to that along with the way that I listen to this book, which I love listening to her books. I feel like they're so good. And if I didn't say what I gave this, it was a 4.5. It was this close to being a 5-star. I just needed a little bit more. But I have no doubt that one of the books within the series is going to be a 5-star. I next read In Her Own League by Liz Tomforty. This is a spin-off to the Windy City series. I gave this book a 3.75. This follows Monty and Reese, and Monty is the father of a character that's within the Windy City series, and Reese is a person that ends up basically taking over the team that he coaches, and she ends up being the first female owner within the Major League Baseball world. And I just thought that that was such an interesting take because obviously that's not a thing that's ever happened before in real life, and I love that Liz Todd 40 tackled that and putting her in this instance of having to deal with a male-dominated industry and just a lot of the sexism that comes along with that, and viewing like a female is not understanding the sport just because she simply is a female. I love that it really dived into Reese's love for baseball and her understanding of the sport, and her growing up around this because her grandpa used to be the owner, and just her really taking a stand and constantly standing up for herself and defending herself against these men that were really not giving her an opportunity, again simply because she was a female. And then I loved Monty in this book. I had no doubt I would. Like, I already loved him, but getting his inner monologue and just the way that he talked about his daughter and his relationship with the Rhodes brothers and then Reese, and just him really being this person that they could all lean into, like relying on and being there for these people, and just the way that he was. I loved seeing him just talk about these relationships with these characters. And then when this book starts out, they both get off on the wrong foot. They both really think that they know what's best for this team, and think that the other is maybe not going to fit into this idea that they have of it, and they come to learn that they both misjudge the other person. And I love how Liz Tom 40 worked through that dynamic, and then just learning that maybe I misjudged this person, and I really just had to get to know them and understand that like they are a good person and they are trying to do what they think is right for the team. I love this conclusion of this like whole world that she had going on in Wendy's City series. I'm so sad that it ended. I really love these characters, but I love a lot of the cameos that we got, especially of the Rhodes brothers and Miller. Miller is literally my favorite female character within the Windy City series, and then Isaiah is one of my favorite male characters in the series. I just love seeing that, and I'm so excited that she's going to be coming out with other books within like this whole universe. I think that's going to be so much fun. City of Bones. This was one of the books that have been on my TBR for a long time, and I am so glad that I finally picked it up. I just got the urge one day, and I'm such a mood reader that I love that this spoke to me when it did, because I feel like I read it at the right moment. I had seen so much about this. I've seen so many people pick this up as an adult, and I've seen so many people absolutely love this first book and then the subsequent series and just this whole world that Cassandra Clare created. And I had like seen the movie as a kid, so I knew some of the things that were going to happen within the story, but there are still things that truly caught me off guard that I didn't see coming, that I didn't know about. And I love that that didn't take away from the experience. And even the major thing that I did know, when it happened, the way it happened, it was really interesting. And it's not something that I feel like, even as an adult, I really would have caught on to. I feel like I was so invested in the story and the fantasy world and just the magic, not really magic system, but like the world she created with the shadow hunters. I was so invested in that that I wasn't really paying attention to like the subplot of romance that was going on. And that was something that too actually shocked me in this book. I didn't expect it to be as fantasy forward as it was, and I actually really loved that. I love that it really went into like the world of shadow hunters, who they are as people, what they do as a society, the fact that they've been around for a long time, and people just don't know that they're basically like coexisting in the real world with them. And I love that it was like urban, and that you could see that they were just interacting with like regular people. And something that I also really found so interesting was that they could essentially like cloak themselves to look like a certain like person, or to make these people view them a certain way. And I thought that was so interesting, like this being a 2010s fantasy and her already having these ideas that are so interesting, and like you could tell she put a lot of thought into that. I really appreciated that. Another thing that I really loved about this book was her writing. I'm not really somebody that typically focuses on writing or is looking for writing within a story, but I noticed it throughout it. I could just again tell how much thought she put into it, how much planning there was, and just the way that she would describe like the sky, or like them walking outside, or like this hideout that they had, was so good, and it really put me in the story. And I loved seeing that, for this again being like when it was from. The twist at the end, like the plot twists were getting me, and I loved that. I love that this was such a good story, and I don't feel like it took me out just because it's catered towards younger people, or just because it's a YA. And you can best believe that I'm going to be continuing the series, because again, I was just so invested in it. I loved where this story was going. This one was a wild card, but I ended up picking up Blood of Hercules. And the reason that this one was a wild card, because before this even got picked up traditionally, so about a year or so ago, I'd seen this book and I'd read the synopsis and was so intrigued, because it's Greek mythology, and I am a Greek mythology girly to my core. I absolutely love it. But as I was reading the synopsis, it was sounding to me like a wide shoes, and I was like, wait a second, I'm not a wide shoes girly, I'm sorry. And so I didn't pick it up, and then people started picking it up. It got popular, and I was freaking right. They're like, it's a wide shoes, and I'm like, that's not my vibe. But again, the mood reader in me one day just said, it sounds really good, Blood of Hercules. And I picked it up, and that was the best decision. This was probably my favorite book of the month, maybe alongside like Reign of Shadows and Endings. It was just so good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The story, the Greek mythology aspects. There is a side character, the snake, named Nyx. That was literally my favorite character in this entire story. Like, the comedic relief within this was so good, and you could just feel the like palpable energy that was coming off of the pages, whether it was like these fight scenes that they were having, or just the inner monologue of the female main character Alexis. It was so good, and it just had me like audibly laughing throughout this entire story, and I really loved that. I didn't expect it to be as funny as it was, and I didn't expect it to, you know, reel me in as fast as it did. Like, it starting out the way it did was not what I expected, but I appreciate that, because I feel like it really laid the foundation for the rest of the story and gave you a really good understanding into who Alexis is as a character, her motives, and the reason why she is just such a fighter. And I loved seeing that in this character, that she really never gave up. She knew what she was there for, and she was not going to let you deter her no matter what you did to her. And there are a lot of things that happened to her in this book, and again, she didn't let that put her down. She knew that she had to keep fighting and never give up, and I love the tenacity of her. But basically, This is about Alexis, and she lives in a world where there are these titans that are roaming around, basically like futuristic Earth, and where she lives, it's Montana, and there are just these like crazy things that are going on. She's growing up in this really abusive foster home family where she is dealing with a lot of hardships, and one day something bad happens. She ends up having to be like plucked out of this world and thrown into like this Greek mythology world where you can basically essentially test into being like the Spartan War Academy or become a Spartan. And that's one of the like best things that can happen to you is you'll basically be set up with these accommodations that a lot of people don't have because these people are just viewed as like the upper echelon. And she doesn't expect this to happen to her, and it ends up happening. She ends up going through this thing called the Crucible, which basically they have, I think it was said it was every 4 years, where they have these groups of people that come in and basically fight to the death. And if you come out of it, you are basically now in like the upper echelon and just have all these perks. So that being in here was so interesting, seeing a lot of the things that are in Greek mythology that I knew, and the way that the author Jasmine like tied this in was so cool. And then seeing that she went to school for Greek mythology, I could tell because there was so much thought behind tying this into the world and making it fit with what was going on, and I just love that. And then there are four main male characters that were in this story that were really like rude, and obviously like that was the point. This is a dark romantasy, and I feel like it really hit on that. And going throughout the story, like seeing her dealing with this and trying to figure out the motives of these other characters and motives of even just characters she's interacting with within the Crucible was really interesting. And again, I just thoroughly enjoyed this. I binged this in like 2 days. This book is like almost 500 pages, but I literally could not put it down. Like every time I went to put it down, my mind was on it. And I'm like, no, you got to pick it back up. No, I got to know what's going on with this. I have to understand where this story is going to go. I physically cannot put this down. And then again, with the ending of this book, it was just insane, and just like the twist that came. Like I somewhat saw it coming, but the extent that it went to was not what I expected. But it just still hit. So since I was coming off the high of reading this book, I then decided to pick up Bond of Hercules, and sadly I did not like this book as much, and I kind of knew I wouldn't. I just heard a lot of people that went from Blood of Hercules to Bond of Hercules and maybe had that like period that they had to wait for it, didn't really enjoy it. There was a lot of talk of it just not being as funny as it was, which I agree with. There not being as much plot within the story, which I agree with, and it just not having that same feeling. And that was a lot of what was going on. I went into it, and I feel like the very beginning of the story, maybe the first 10 to 15%, was giving me a lot of the same vibes of Blood of Hercules, and I was so invested in it. And then the further along it went, I just lost interest. It was just kind of becoming a lot more about the relationship between some of the characters, and it being more like physical, and then developing that relationship. And I wasn't really interested in that. I wanted to explore more of like Alexis's story and seeing how she felt about what happened at the end of the last book, and just learning more about her. And while I feel like we learned some things about her, I wanted more. And then on top of it, it wasn't as funny, and it wasn't as like gripping and captivating as the first book, which the first book I actually gave a 4.5. The second book I gave a 2.5, and if that tells you anything, that was the difference within it. It just didn't hit. But I will say that I love that I read these back to back, because I feel like the feelings that I had of Blood of Hercules helped me throughout Bonds of Hercules, and it wasn't as difficult of a read for me based on like comparing it to maybe if I decided to read it maybe like 2 or 3 months down the line. I feel like that could have been a different experience, and I might have rated it lower, but I was still thinking about the films that I have from Blood of Hercules, and Bonds of Hercules did not diminish like my love at all for this book. I was still obsessed with it. Like I've been thinking about it since I finished it, and I finished this, I think it was at the beginning of March, and I just have not stopped thinking about it. And then seeing that then there's going to be more books within the series, and it's going to follow like a different storyline, I am so intrigued by that. So I can't wait until that comes out. I next read Destin, which is a romantic suspense small town romance, and I actually saw this on the author's Instagram, and it just sounded so interesting. She had the first book, which is Destin. The second book, I can't remember what it's called, but it's coming out I think at the end of this year, And that's really the one that was gripping me the most. But I wanted to read the first and get an idea of where this story was potentially going to go. But they are basically a group of like interconnected standalones that follow these siblings that live in this small town in, I think it was Wyoming, or one of the like smaller like western states. I can't even remember what state it was honestly, but it was set in there. And this girl Millie is basically rolling through town and ends up stopping at this motel and is basically just trying to get her bearings because she's running from something that happened in her hometown, and is basically just trying to like start anew. She keeps going after this and stumbles into this town she's going to be staying in. Her car breaks down. She's going underneath her car, and all of a sudden she hears this loud slam of a door. She's freaking out naturally. She's underneath her car and she's wondering who saw it. This guy walked up, and he basically just starts making all these inferences about what she's doing there, why is she underneath her car, and they just essentially don't get off to a good start. They really are clashing. Throughout the story, you basically see them start to realize that they both misinterpreted these interactions that they were having, and that maybe they actually like each other. Maybe we just were catching each other at the wrong time, and maybe there's more here and I should get to know this person. But I did really love the romantic suspense element of the story. I will say I was more there for the suspense over the romance. Personally, for me, the romance was more lustful, and I didn't really love that about it. I was more intrigued into what was going on with Millie and this stalker that she had, and I felt like the author did such a good job in introducing these thoughts that like the stalker was having, the investigation that Emmett was doing, which Emmett is the sheriff of this town, and Millie's like thoughts on why this is happening to her, her trying to understand why she's being targeted, and just the progression of the suspense plot I thought was really, really good. I was really captivated by that the entire time. While I did guess off the bat who the stalker was and kind of like his motivations, I still love the way that the author laid the breadcrumbs for you to try to figure it out. I thought she did such a good job on that, like truly. That's one of the best romantic suspense books I've read in a long time, and you can really tell that she was putting a lot of thought into a lot of these other things that were going on in the town, and how she could connect it to what was going on with Millie, and just bring in a lot of like aspects of cops and what they do when there's an investigation, and how they go through the proceedings, and basically what you're doing whenever there are these things happening in your town and you're not accustomed to it happening. I thought she did a really good job on that. And then also the writing, again, I said I'm not a big person that pays attention to writing, but I, in the beginning especially, really, really loved her writing. It was really pulling me in. It was having me just want to keep flipping the page. Like, I was so intrigued by the way she was describing things, and the way that she was describing these feelings that these characters were having, and just the things that they were going through. I thought she did such a good job on that. I then picked up one of my anticipated releases of this month. First was In Her Own League, and then we went into Love Song, and I had one more this month. But Love Song was the next book that I picked up. I gave this book a 3.5. I ended up settling on this because for me the ending of the story was not my favorite, and I don't love the way that the male main character was acting. But the reason why that was happening for me was this book started out really, really good. I was so, so excited about it. This is a second gen book about Garrett Graham and John Logan's kids, Blake and Wyatt. Not me forgetting this man's name. I feel like that says a lot. But I was so excited about it because I love Off Campus, and I love Briar U. I love Garrett Graham, and I really love the dynamic that they had within that series. So seeing that their kids were going to have books, and then have a book, and then at the same point they're going to be having a relationship, just that was my bread and butter. Sign me up. And I was so, so excited. This book was really promising up until about the 50-60% mark. I was so intrigued. I love that it was set on Lake Tahoe, and it having these summer vibes, and just this character Blake doing a lot of self-discovery because she had just recently broken up with her boyfriend because he did something shady, and she was going to this lake house that they had and was basically just trying to have the summer of Blake, and trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life. That she really wants to stay in college, and she loves, you know, the degree that she's pursuing, and just really trying to figure out like who she is outside of this relationship. And when she gets to this lake house, Lo and behold, somebody else is there. It just so happens to be Wyatt, which is this guy she's had a crush on for years. She's always thought that he was so mysterious and cool. He has this whole like rocker vibe going on. He plays guitar, and she's just always really liked him, and it's really shocked to find out that he's here at the lake house when she thought it was just going to be herself. She is really perplexed by that, but also intrigued because she's thinking, hey, this guy is here, like I've always liked him. Maybe I need to know him a little bit better and just see what goes on between the two of us. And when this book started, I really was again intrigued by her really doing this like self-discovery journey and just getting to see like the dads within this and the dad chats. That's literally one of my favorite things of these second gen books. They're so funny, and just getting to see them dote on their kids or talk about their partners or just their college days and what it means to them. I love seeing it because obviously, like, I previously read your books and now I'm seeing you as a parent, and just seeing them dote on their children is the sweetest thing ever. I absolutely love it. And so when this started out, there was a scene that's set like 2 years prior, and that one was really, really interesting. I love being able to see some of these previous characters that we've seen, and then it fast forwards, and then they're in the lake house. And again, like I said, the first 50 to 60%, I was so invested in. I was loving the author's writing. I was loving the storytelling. I was loving the pacing of the characters' relationship. I thought it was really good. We hit the 50 to 60% mark, and all of a sudden, it was just lust central. So much lust that I didn't understand. I said, I don't get why these characters are doing this when you've known each other your entire lives. Blake has had this huge crush on Wyatt for pretty much almost her entire life. Wyatt might have only started recently noticing her and developing these feelings, but why is it only lust forward? Why are there not things that you're talking about that's about this person's personality or the way that they make you feel? It was just talking about like their bodies and how they thought that they were so hot, and there's nothing wrong with saying anybody's hot, that's okay, but it's the fact that that's really the things that they were bringing up whenever they were talking about this other character. It wasn't that I thought you were, you know, so smart, or if I said you were smart, then I also got to talk about your body. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. It can just be that this person is smart or this person is talented, and that's it. We don't have to then go talk about the way that they look. And that's what really started taking me out of the story, because that's mainly what I feel like the main male character was doing. He was consistently talking about the way that the girl looked good, and he liked like the shape of her and just all these things where I didn't love that. I would have wanted him to really profess the things that he started feeling for her and the way that he felt about her, and that these feelings were like an onslaught and he didn't expect it. But that's not what was going on. It was lust filled. And as we go throughout the story, I love again that we ended up having some of these second gen characters come in, and the characters from other stories that were previously developed by Elle Kennedy in this book. I really, really love that. I love that you kind of got an insight into how they're doing and where they are in life, and just their viewpoints on these relationships that are going on throughout this book. And towards the end of the book, the reason why this ended up going from, I would say from the 50% to 60% mark, it was a 4 for me. Once we got to the end and there was this like plot twist thrown in, and then this huge like miscommunication trope, I can't even say it, miscommunication trope, I really started getting really peeved about it. I didn't love the way that that was handled. I didn't love the way that these two interacted with each other after the fact. And then again, not to say that only the male main character is the problem, because he wasn't, but the way that he was talking about how he felt about the female character, and then he would proceed to do things that made me think he didn't really feel the way he was saying he felt, I didn't appreciate it. And if you've read the book, you'll understand what I'm talking about. I obviously don't want to give it away, but his actions were not matching the words that he was saying, and I didn't love that that was the way that he was handling the entire situation. I would have preferred it to be like, maybe I am still trying to figure out if my feelings really are the way that I feel, or if it's because we are in this environment and I started to develop these feelings. And maybe I'm not at the point I think I'm at, but I really do like this person and I really want to try. So that's why that book ended up being a 3.5. Again, I love that this was second gen. I love that we were back in this world. I love the characters. I love the family dynamics. I thought it was so, so good. I loved her writing in the very beginning. It was so, you know, thrilling, and just was really making me so into the story. And then she also had a subplot of kind of like a mystery element, paranormal mystery element, I guess if you will, that I was actually intrigued by. I've seen discourse on that. I feel like a lot of people didn't care, and I actually did enjoy it. It was really interesting. So I then read Hunt the Villain. If my face is telling you literally anything, this book was so good. Oh my gosh, I'm still on the high of it. Like, I literally can't. I think I finished it last week, and I have not stopped thinking about it. It was so good. This was a dark romance within Rena Kent's whole universe, and this is the second book in the Villain series. And you see breadcrumbs of these two main male characters, Julian and Vaughn, throughout Kiss the Villain, and kind of like other stories like Legacy of Gods, and just seeing their story and the way that Rena told it was so good. By the way, if my description already is not giving away, I gave this book a 5-star. This was my second 5-star, and my other 5-star was God of Fury. So let that tell you what that needs to tell you. But again, I just truly enjoyed this story so much. It was so good. I love the emotions of it. I love that these men were both possessive of each other. I thought that was so good. I loved their dynamic. I loved getting the background of why these two were having problems throughout the story and why they really didn't like each other. I thought it made a lot of sense. There was a lot of things that happened that were really trying to drive a wedge between them and keep them apart, and it somewhat made sense, and I also hated it because you could just tell how much they truly cared about each other, what they meant to each other, how I feel like this really could have been avoided and they could have had this relationship like long standing versus it being like years in the future. But it was so good. I really loved how she started out the story. I truly didn't expect it to start the way it did, and the amount of time that she spent on it I felt like was necessary to lay the foundation of the relationship and just give you context into why they were having these problems. Like, if that wasn't there, I feel like it might not have been a 5. Like, it really was necessary. I feel like she did such a good job with the pacing, especially just the things that she talked about, where she placed them, when she talked about them, the amount of time she spent on everything was just perfect. Like, I don't think she could have paced it any better. The way that these two relationships developed was really good. I like that it wasn't really lustful. You could tell again that they really were into each other, but they were trying to really find ways to express their feelings and let the other know that it's not just because I think you're hot or because I've been obsessed with you for years. It's more, I see a lot in you and I know that I'm into you and I want you to understand that I really, really want a relationship with you, and how can I show you that? And I feel like they just did such a good job, both of them, of finding a way to express that I want a relationship or I want to see where this goes. I'm struggling with like how I feel about you. Let me tell you, or can you pull this out of me so we can talk about it? And just the communication between the two of them, I feel like was really done well throughout the story. I truly enjoyed it. It just was so good, and I really won't say that I expected less of her. I, again, really loved like God of Fury. Wasn't the biggest fan of Kiss the Villain, and just kind of went in with just regular expectations for her, but it exceeded it. I feel like I didn't expect it to pull the emotions out of me that it did. I wasn't expecting to feel the way that I did about Julian especially, as well as Vaughn. And then also just the breadcrumbs of like the monster trilogy that she put in this book. She was doing that for the girlies that read it, and I have to say I'm so glad that I read the monster trilogy before this because it just added to the experience. Seeing Sasha and Kirill and just these things that they were talking about and me saying, oh, I know what you're talking about. Oh, I know what's going on. I understand. I loved it. It just really added to it, and just seeing them be parents was so awesome because you could tell that they were really not trying to be the parents that they grew up with. They were going to be there for their son. They were going to support him no matter what. They were going to have his back. And I loved seeing it. I loved that they were never going to sit there and make him feel like he was an outcast or that they didn't love him or that they didn't support him. You could just tell that they were going to make sure that they gave him everything that he needed and that he could rely on them. And it was so good. And then Julian is like Nikolai 2.0, but in the best way possible. Like, he's Nikolai, but he's not Nikolai. He still has his own personality. He's still so goofy and chaotic and like a ray of sunshine at times. And also just has these things that he's dealing with that make him basically outwardly show that he's okay, but he's actually struggling. And just seeing his journey throughout the story and seeing him being able to eventually confide in Vaughn and just, realize that like he's not the problem, it's just the circumstances that he's in, and coming out on the other side was just, it was so good. And he just, as a character, I really loved him. And again, it's not that I didn't expect that, I just feel like I didn't expect to love him as much as I did. Their relationship also was just so sweet, and I loved the tender moments that they had, and that they could rely on each other, and just the things that they were telling each other. And as it happened, it was so organically done, and it was just so good. Like, I loved it. And then people had to go and say that this was the last second Jinn book, and I needed them to not say that because I thought nothing of it. And then they did, and I'm like, no, I still have God of War, so I'm not done yet. But it is, and I just hate that because she's just created this thing that I absolutely love. And I've said this before, literally, God of Malice is what got me back into dark romance, and I wouldn't have like this dark romance shelf behind me if it wasn't for her and God of Malice and Legacy of Gods and what it means to me. And then just having this book and it being, just a breath of fresh air, and you could just tell that she really put so much thought into this and was just really giving us what we wanted. And it was better than I expected. Like, simply put, I couldn't put it down. I also binged this within, I think, like 3 days, and this book was chunky, and I could have had more. It was so good, and I just loved her writing. I love the way she described things. I love the mafia aspects. Hold on, the mafia aspects in this book. Oh, that was so good. I was not expecting that, and that just enhanced the experience for me. I was so into it, and I just love that she included that. Like, there was plot to this book, there was action, and I was so in it. It literally did everything I needed it to do, and I already feel like I'm gonna be rereading that alongside God of Fury. I just can't stop thinking about it. It was just so good. I then picked up Flawless, which is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series. I gave this book a 3.5. I will preface this by saying I've read this book previously, probably like 2 years ago. I think I got 70 to 80% in, and I stopped because for me it was getting too spicy, and I was just like lost within it. I didn't want to continue. But I read Heartless within the series, and I have not read Powerless or Reckless, and knew that I wanted to go back and reread this and experience it and have the context that I needed to read stories within this universe later on. And I'm glad that I did, because I feel like it really gave me context into a character that's going to have a book within the series, and I'm glad that I did. This is about Summer, right? Summer is basically this like person that works for PR under her dad, and Brett is this bull rider that's really popular. He essentially goes off and starts mouthing off about a sponsorship that he has with Milk, and they end up dropping him. That was the major sponsorship that he has, and essentially now the PR firm is trying to do, you know, not damage, what's the word I'm looking for? It's trying to like do cleanup basically, and the person that runs this PR firm basically puts Summer as a babysitter for Rhett so that she can help with him cleaning up his image, and essentially just polished up the way that he's looking to society. I enjoyed this book. I read this actually in a day, which was kind of shocking. I didn't expect to do that, but I felt like that was the best way to read this book because I liked it. I didn't love it. I thought that their relationship was really sweet, especially within the beginning. I loved being able to revisit, like Harvey and seeing Cade, like pre-Willa. I thought that that was really cool. And then I loved being able to see like Summer and kind of like how she developed throughout the story, and Brett too, and their relationship. I thought it was good to see that before going into other books. And it was funny too, being able to come back to this and knowing what these other books are about and who the characters are going to be, and seeing the fact that Elsie was already naming them in this book was kind of funny, because now you know like who's within it, but obviously she was already thinking about that, and I love that. And again, I'm just glad that I did pick this up because I enjoyed the bull riding aspect of it. I thought that was so much fun. I love that it was kind of like country, and just getting to see the dynamics between these characters along with their families and how that shaped them as people, and just the struggles that they were still dealing with because of the way that they were raised, and like their relationship with their family I thought was good. Again, I liked the bull riding. I thought That was so much fun. It kind of reminded me of the last song. I don't know why when I read books about bull riding, that's the book that I always think about, but the guy that does ride bulls. But anyway, I like this. I love that I read it because it did give me context into a story that comes up within the series, and that's the reason that I went back and read this, and I'm glad I did because it's going to make a character I feel like makes so much sense throughout it, and you probably already know what I'm talking about. But I love that. I loved, being able to revisit this and not remember really a lot of what happened, which I expected that to happen. Again, I read this book probably like 2 years ago and didn't even finish it, and just coming back to it and being in this world and just kind of seeing the way that it started, I enjoyed it, and I can't wait to continue on so I can read Powerless and Reckless. The last book that I read was a dark romance. It's called Ruining Him. I found this on Kindle Unlimited, and it just sounded so interesting because the girl is essentially like a psycho, and I thought that that was interesting within a dark romance because typically whenever this is happening, it's the guy and he's the one that's obsessed with the girl, and the girl is, scared of him or is trying to explore these things about herself that she never expected, and that was not the case with this book. Her name is Lana, his name is Cole. They go to this like elite college where like the rich of the rich of the rich, like just uber rich people go, and it's hard to get into. Like nobody gets into it easily. It's basically kids that have grown up within the same private schools, and they go to this school, this college, and they all know each other. So she basically ends up coming to the school one day. People are talking, they're wondering who she is. They can't figure out like why this new girl started. She dresses differently to everybody. She doesn't really care about people's opinions. She seems kind of, rough around the edges, and they can't understand why she's here. And this guy Cole takes this weird interest in her and is trying to understand why this is. And he feels like the only way to make this stop is to torture her. And lo and behold, he starts realizing I'm messing with somebody that is not going to take anything from me, that is going to give it back as good as she takes. And, it's not who I thought she was. And I like the story. I ended up giving it a 3.5. I thought it was cool to see a different dynamic where the female main character was somebody that, again, was not going to take anything from the guy. That the guy was kind of actually essentially scared of her. And I actually liked that. I thought that that was really interesting. I also love the mystery element that was going on in this book. I didn't really expect it. Again, Lana, she has this mysterious past where throughout the book you kind of start learning why she ends up coming to the school and the things that brought her there. And I just thought that that was so interesting. I love seeing their relationship develop and just them kind of learning to lean on each other and give each other space when it's needed and just talk to each other, and realizing that, again, I feel like this has been a common thing throughout the books that I read. These people that you think you don't actually know. You get off on the wrong foot. It's just not a good first interaction or second, third interaction, and maybe they're just not who I thought they were. And it was just so intriguing. Again, I really love that there was a kind of character switch, if you will. Even though Cole was still kind of crazy, it was nothing on Lana. Like, she was actually crazy, and I really loved seeing it. I thought it was so interesting, and I just enjoyed it. And I felt like it was such a good way to round out the month. I kind of started backing off dark romance a little bit, and then again just randomly saw this on Kindle and it was intriguing, and I picked it up, and I mean, I don't regret it. I thought it was pretty good. So those are the 10 books that I read in March. Again, I had such a good reading month. I had so many bangers, Reign of Shadows and Endings, Blood of Hercules, Hunt the Villain. Oh, Hunt the Villain literally stole the show and just was a book I didn't expect doing that. Again, like I said, just thoroughly enjoyed it. It was so much fun. I just love the books that I read this month. April, I feel like, is going to be stacked. There's some really good releases coming out. There are books that I'm really excited about that I picked for my April TBR, and I am just so looking forward to picking those up and just seeing where the month takes me. So if you finished watching this video, I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you had a good reading month for March and that your April is going to be amazing. And I would love to know what you're reading.